Hello, everyone, and welcome to Improving Students' Attainment and Employability in Italy with Skills Education. This is a Times Higher Education Roundtable in partnership with Coursera. My name is Alistair Lawrence. I'm the Special Projects Editor at THE, and I'd like to thank you all for joining today's discussion. An on-demand version of this roundtable and a summary article of its key findings will be published on the Times Higher Education website post-event, should you wish to revisit this content or share it with your colleagues. So I'd like to begin straight away by noting that as universities continue to undergo a massive global change in the way that they deliver teaching and learning, educating skilled, employable students is becoming increasingly important in Italy and around the world. So to start, I would like to ask the panel how courses and curricula can be blended to increase student engagement. Marco, would you like to perhaps tell us about how you've worked at your institution?
Yeah, gladly. Now, first of all, let me give you a little bit of perspective on Politecnico di Torino. We have, I think, a very high level performance about employability. We've got something like the last surveys were 87.5% at 1 year from graduation versus 68% in Italy, and a 5-year graduation employment rate of 96.5 versus 87.7. And the average salary of our students is something that ranges between 6 and 12% more than the average. So we're happy about it, but we are a little bit concerned about how could we improve the performance still. The major point is that we realize we are a large technical university, and let's say coming out with architects and engineers, which are great, is fine, but we want to make them even better. We are a fairly large university, by the way. We're looking after something like 36 or 37,000 students. So we have to look after a big variety of students, ranging from the normal students up to the most talented ones. So we don't only want to improve the employability per se, because the performance is pretty good. We want to make them very good. So one way we do this, of course, is through honors programs for talented students, which basically imply additional courses and a lot of project work. And we've got special programs for that called Intraprendenti, or entrepreneurial students at the bachelor's level. And then we have the Alta Scuola Politecnica, which is a honors program that we run together with Politecnico di Milano. And then the other thing that we try to do is to make sure that students actually can gain hands-on interdisciplinary experience that is, of course, much valuable in the eyes of companies. So we've started experimenting with a number of ways. One of them is to run student competitions, and now we have something like at least 15 student teams that compete globally, from everything from boats to cars to motorbikes to flying objects and whatever. And that is a very nice experience that we have. And we also have challenges where student teams have to let's say, reply to challenges being set forward by corporate partners. And we also have entrepreneurship programs. So the major idea here is to make sure that students, not all students, because the numbers are very big, of course, but the highest number of students possible is actually taking part at some time of their career to something that goes beyond their traditional lecture, lab experience, and fill in your exam paper and then you're it, because I think this is most important. Finally, another point that is quite of concern to us is related to the impact that we can have on society locally in Torino, but also in Italy broadly. So the point is that usually students that come out of Politecnico di Torino have the career aim of going to work in a fairly large company. I mean, of course, working for a large corporation, which might be a Google, or it might also be a more, let's say, traditional company like Total, Eni, or something, is quite important. Now, the point is that Italy is a country that is, let's say, as a matter of fact, and it's not a nice thing, I think, it's more a liability than an issue, but it's a feature of Italy made up of small and medium-sized companies. So the point is, how do we make sure that our students don't only go to large multinationals, especially abroad, but also have a cadre of skills that make them interested into small companies, and so they become interested into small companies, and they're interested in small companies as well. Because the idea is that, I mean, many small companies are doomed to remain small forever, but this is not necessarily so. Some of them might be, let's say, growing in the future because of generational change in management and so on. So the point is, how do we make sure that our students also consider at least a career in a small and potentially growing company, and of course, startups and the like. So this is one thing that we're trying to look into, which is, and we're still at the beginning of this process.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. Sammy, can I come to you next, please? Because I'm aware that you're partnership director for EMEA at Coursera, and you work with Coursera's university partners in Italy to help source high quality content and onboard it for Coursera's learner community. The process that Marco is describing, where you need to have different solutions for different types of students, is this something that is becoming, more in demand in your experience?
Absolutely. I think as learners have evolved the way that they actually consume information, I think that's made a big difference in not only needing to do that from a kind of pedagogical point of view, but also learners are becoming more confident in asking for this outright and saying, this doesn't work for me anymore. I want to do it. I want to be able to learn in a different way. A 9 or 10 a.m. lecture just doesn't work for me versus maybe a 10 p.m. workshop online where I can collaborate because that's the right time for me to study. So we are seeing that happen a lot more. It's interesting, Marco brings up the point of how do you make local hiring more interesting, both to the learner, but also to the company itself. And I think we've seen this on a global level that I think can be replicated in other countries, such as hiring consortia, where, Politecnico di Torino could potentially work with 200 to 300 local employers to create a hiring consortium where actually the Politecnico di Torino degree means quite a lot to those local employers, because they know that there are particular parts of that education pathway that means that the learner will definitely come out with the skills required. We know that small to medium companies are less likely to take risks as larger organizations that can absorb errors a little bit more. And so if you can really show that they're going to come out with those skills, then you're more likely to be interesting to those small and medium enterprises.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And can I come to you next, please? Can you tell us a little bit about how courses have become blended at Lorenzo de Medici and how student attitudes are changing to the education they receive?
Yes, we have a different picture, and really being a higher education host institution located in Florence, we host students from over 60 countries. The majority are from the US. Over 60% are from the US. Therefore, our problem is completely different from Politecnico di Torino and other institutions in Italy, because our students do not stay for the full degree time. So they only come for one semester, maximum 1 year, for the majority of them. So the major issue is to create an alignment between the institution, home institutions that are sending the students abroad to study at LBM, at Lorenzo de Medici, and with local industries, artigiani, local, as the Politecnico di Torino mentioned, we have realities which are really rich in creativity and so on, but they are small. So therefore, they can only host a few students and few potential employer. But in our case, being foreigners, our students cannot be employed as a full-time. So therefore, they come for internship experience. So the basic issue is not really to follow a total vision of the soft skills. What we're looking for is to individualize, to come up with the essential skills, what is really essential to the students. So the students remain the focus at the center of the research. So therefore is matching with LPM, working and also matching with their own their own degree pattern back home. So this is basically our major issue that we are facing each semester and each year at LPM. So practically still today under the emergency program, because of COVID restrictions, we have to limit and be more cautious, because each industry in each local entity can only host 1 or 2 students at a time. So therefore, potentially we could do more, but realistically on the ground, we need to deal with what's going on, and we need to deal also with the needs of students' immediate requirements. As I mentioned, we are looking for to spot the essential skills. So therefore, it's not to match and make them study everywhere, but to spot exactly what is necessary for them for the limited time while they stay in it.
Okay, thank you very much, Annie. And also thank you to Adolfo for joining us. If you would like to turn your camera on and join the discussion, we're happy to include you. Hello, buongiorno. We were discussing about the how blended learning is being delivered at your colleague's university, and as part of that, the need to engage with students in a slightly different way. Some of this has taken the form of preparing them for careers and different types of companies. And in others, it has been about delivering particular skills that they will need to make them more employable. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your institution, please, and how these measures and how delivery is changing at University of Bergamo. I don't know if we've, no, we may have. The joys of Zoom calls. Okay. Well, Bhavin, in that case, maybe we could just if you could tell us a little bit about the personalization that Coursera sees as it tracks users through its platform. Oh, Adolfo, can you hear us okay? No? Okay. Bhavin, can you perhaps tell us about the personalization that you see through the Coursera platform and how the kind of skills matching that Annie is talking about is taking place?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, I'll take this approach where I'll share the kind of the stories that I've heard from the universities that I'm working with, but also some of Coursera's experience. I'm not going to talk about kind of pedagogies because that tends not to be my background. But what I will say in terms of the hybridized journey is that in a lot of the conversations that we're having with departmental heads and faculty leads at Italian universities, there's a real focus on how do we prepare, how do we adequately prepare students for a workforce when the speed of change within that workforce is increasing at a rapid rate. So there's this discussion around kind of students coming out and becoming highly employable with the skills that they've received from the university for at least the first 6 months to a year. But actually, from a year and a half onwards, the likelihood of them changing job and then changing career is really, really high. So we want to make sure that we come out with kind of highly agile students who can kind of maneuver their way through a changing jobs landscape. So when Annie was talking about kind of working through essential skills, a lot of the conversations that I'm hearing are about making sure that there is a broader skill set that students are coming out with. So for example, some master students who are taking courses in accountancy are absolutely brilliant at forensic accounting. But in order for them to share that information, that knowledge that they've learned with a non-accounting audience, they lack those skills because actually they don't inherently occur in a typical accounting curriculum. So we talk about personalization. It's about identifying where those skills would be most beneficial in an emerging jobs market and kind of pulling that in so it works very nicely side by side with a traditional curriculum. This is the hybrid model that we're hearing more and more.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you very much, Bhavin. Another thing we wanted to talk about is is actually sort of not just personalizing student pathways, but doing it to maximize attainment. Marco, you spoke earlier about how the different ways that you're embedding students with different companies. Is the way that you are assessing them changing as the type of course that they and the type of learning that they are doing is changing as well?
I mean, the learning experience was already changing before COVID, and COVID was a massive natural experiment about how to make things change. I mean, this is something we all experienced, that overnight you received an email that said, tomorrow you're not going to the lecture theater anymore, go on Zoom, full stop. So, I mean, if you don't take this as an incredible opportunity to learn, I mean, you'll never have something like that in your own lives. So what is happening today, I think, is that there's a big debate. Now, people have turned back to the lecture theaters, at least in our university, with all the green passes and the masks and all that sort of stuff. But the big discussion is between, let's say, the progressives and the reactionaries. It's a little bit like when Napoleon was defeated, and you had the European Restoration with people trying to go back to the experience that was before the French Revolution, and even fashion was going back. So you had this funny thing, you know, of some people dressing up like in decades before, and other people dressing up in different guises. So what is happening now is that some people are saying, let's go back. Let's pretend COVID hasn't happened at all. And other people are saying, no, the future is everything goes online. So the key, let's say, problem that we have today is the discernment about what to keep about this natural experiment and what to not keep. This is in very high level terms. Very practically, for instance, we have had the experience in the first semester of COVID that people were joining online in real time. We were recording lectures, but nobody was actually looking at these recordings. That was the first semester. Now, the second semester and the third that we had was different. You would have your lecture online, and you would realize that only a portion of the people, of the students, would join in real time, because the rest would actually look at the recordings, probably firing it up at 1.5 speed, like they see the Netflix series. Now, if I talk about this to a colleague of mine of the first type, the reactionary, he says, oh, call the exorcist. This is not good, okay? Do something about it. And if I look at a progressive, that person will say, well, you know what? That student who is not joining in your boring lecture, okay, and is looking at that lecture at 10 p.m., is simply using his time better. And maybe that student has some kind of attention deficit or is not so prepared to look at your lecture. So he or she has the opportunity to see the recording and see it again and again and again until he gets it. So that's brilliant. Okay, so I think we have all these sort of discussions going on, and I think this is really crucial. So trying to understand all the different means that we experienced during COVID, what is to retain and what is to throw away, because many things we will have to throw away. And I don't think that the answer is univocal. I mean, each course, each professor, each student group, okay, will need a different recipe. And this is bewildering, because if I'm a professor, what is the right pedagogical approach that I should have, given what I am, given my subject, and given my students? I don't know. So, and I think this is, I mean, this is the major, let's say, dominant theme we have today. And of course, this also brings down to the second discussion, that is, how does all this boils down to bringing the students into a learning experience that has both conflicting requirements of having skills that are immediately expendable in the job market, but also the long-lasting mindset and capabilities, okay, not skills, but capabilities, to actually continue their learning experience throughout their professional lives. I mean, we have students that are leaving us when they're 23, and they will probably retire when they're 78, because I mean, this is probably the duration of professional life for these young people. Otherwise, I will not have anybody paying my pension and my retirement. And how do we make sure that these students are still valid professionals when they will be relatively old in their time? So of course, we have to teach them up-to-date skills, but we also have to teach them, let's say, a more long-lasting mindset. And this is not easy because you can't have it all. So it's, I think that the major discussion today is about understanding what is valid today and what is long-lasting, and what should we do traditionally, and what new things we have learned over these last years which are valid and should be retained.
Thank you very much. And Bhavin, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to respond?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add on the first thing, Marco. I think the way that you explained that was really brilliant. I love the difference between the progressives and the reactionaries. I remember when the first national global lockdown took place, and you could see country after country locking down, and then the knock-on effect with several industries, including education. And then there was this huge shift to moving learning online because it needed to continue in some way, shape, or form. You had students in their tens of thousands going to these universities, and they all had to be served in some kind of way. And it was interesting the first couple of weeks because there was this tremendous ask of the professors where people who are phenomenal in a classroom environment were told to take all of that talent and all of that expertise and deliver it online at scale. And it's unfortunate because actually it's a different skill set altogether. You know, just because you're fantastic in a traditional classroom environment doesn't necessarily mean you're even comfortable in teaching to an online group. You know, you've got no sense of reaction. There's no feedback from the students. The fact is they can all turn off their webcams if they want to. So it can feel quite isolating. So I think that was that was one of the things that stood out for me. And the other part of it is this idea of inclusivity. So if we look at the two approaches, and the two approaches I think are rapidly merging into one overall approach, kind of traditional classroom-based learning with traditional classroom-based hours, and then you've got the online learning model, which is hyper flexible. For us over here at Coursera, and I'm sure Sammy will attest to this, there's a learning culture within Coursera, but also every organization of every size has a learning culture. The idea is that when you come out of university, the learning continues throughout wherever you go to work. And we've got that deeply embedded over here. Now, I've got two young children. I spend the normal working hours doing my working hours job, but my learning takes place when my children have gone to sleep. And actually, if it's a traditional classroom-based learning, if I'm asked to pull away from that, that becomes quite difficult for me. So as a bit of a mature learner myself, I think having the option, having that flexibility helps with my own personal needs. And I wonder from a university point of view, when we look over at the demographics, having that mixed approach perhaps serves one group of learners better than another group of learners.
Okay, thank you, Bhavin. Annie, I would like to ask about the process Marco describes with the learner, progressive versus reactionary, if you like, and how that culture change is being managed at LDM. You know, is it a case of deciding by subject? You spoke before about, you know, skills matching. Is it a case of trying to match teachers to or students to certain types of ways of learning and working with staff so that they can deliver that?
Yes. When I was mentioning about matching, I don't mean just matching the curricula, the different courses to the needs of the students, you know, but also matching professors with their own skills. That means in the moment of emergency, we need to consider that COVID can become an opportunity as a lab that we all get together and we understand our limits and we can take advantage, for example, studying, modeling, say tailoring a subject to the necessary need, to the practical needs of the students. Therefore, on the practical side, and I'm always realistic, we need to provide what are the immediate needs, you know, because in this moment, the students, particularly those that come to LDM, that they come from many different institutions in many countries, and they use the lingua franca English as a convey language to speak to each other. It is also difficult for them to get into the Italian reality, to get involved with institutions, industries, commerce, and so on. So therefore, they require from their own background, then they require also a first matching. The first matching starts at home, at their own institutions, depending on their academic path. The second one is our own, how we're going to be able to customize ourselves to the needs of the students. At the moment, we are really thinking, and we are working, we are analyzing, and we're putting up all the experience of the last year and a half or so on the COVID, that we can take, we can consider the long distance or the remote teaching as a complementary, not a substitution of their educational process. The students need a physical contact. Let's not forget that there are things that we can convey online. As my colleague just mentioned, sometimes they might not get, we don't get as academically feedbacks, essentially, if they have not visualized the content of the video, because we are talking about videos, especially when it's asynchronous and it can be heard at their own, when they have their own time. So the point is this, the students, particularly those that come to LDM, they choose to study in Italy or in any other country, they need a one-to-one contact with someone that speaks their own language, possibly, and also they will do their own best to speak also Italian or whatever they can. So the important thing is to match. When I was talking about matching and talking about essential skills, it's really see exactly what are the necessities of the students at that specific moment. Let's say now we are talking about fall. In this moment, students are in Florence, they are studying, but limiting to the restrictions that we have in this moment in force. And the same thing will be in the spring. In the spring, we don't know yet what will be the format, but we have an idea. And at the same time, the students that are preparing themselves, because we prepare them before they arrive through orientation and so on. And therefore, we match them with whatever is going to be available, specifically available for next spring. So it's really a race that is an endless race, and it requires flexibility and capacity. And this is a difficult task for someone that in the past years, we have really lived in a comfort zone, an academic comfort zone. Everything was just like seasons. You have spring, summer, fall, and everything was really rolling down easily. Now we really to face items, difficulties day by day, week by week. So this is the most important thing, not be afraid of ourselves.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eni. Sammy, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I thought some of the points that Eni brought up are really interesting around, initially he kind of talked about those essential skills and what is it that students really need, but also that matching element. And from what I've seen, I've worked in the HE sector for about 15 years, and from what I've seen, universities around the world do a varying degree of benchmarking and testing right at the very beginning of the learner journey. And some go very, very deep into it, and others kind of rely on external vendors or kind of hope that actually, rather than testing at the beginning, some of those needs or areas of concern will come out during the program rather than worrying about it at the early stage. At the moment, I'm working with Politecnico di Milano as one of our partners on a entry test that is being developed with Microsoft. And it's about assessing soft skills, digital skills, hard skills, trying to really get deeper into understanding what is it that learners really need. Lorenzo de Medici, a fantastic university at what it does, I've worked with institutions like that in the UK that deliver a similar curriculum and similar type of program. I think what sometimes goes missing, maybe because you're so specialized and so niche in what you deliver, are some of those fundamental and kind of essential skills that sometimes people need for employability. And it's about how do you introduce that while also still trying to deliver such a niche curriculum to the learner, right? How do you, because whatever you add to the program, you're going to have to take something away. There's limited time available for the learner. And so what is it that you can take away from the program to allow you to introduce some of those really important skills, like CV building, or knowing how to negotiate, knowing how to deal with bad feedback from your manager at work. You know, those are really, really essential skills that actually learners, when they leave the comfort of university and enter the working world, can really struggle with. That idea of resilience. How do you actually get that first job and stay in that first job without worrying that actually I don't fit in, I don't belong, because I'm missing some of the skills that other people have. And so it's about being able to be flexible enough to allow for that to happen if the learner really wants it. But it is a challenge at times. I've seen that it is a challenge for some institutions to know how much can I take away from my core curriculum and allow for that development to happen.
Is there also a danger, Sammy, that when we talk about skills shortages, we look at the most glaring skills shortages and the ones that dominate the headlines? So, for example, not everybody can be a computer scientist, even though there is clearly a great need for a computer scientist, and there's an opportunity for people to have great careers where they earn a lot of money, or they can choose where they work with much greater flexibility.
Yeah, so just on that point, I think it's really important to note that a lot of the time, learners will not actually surface the problems that they have, maybe due to embarrassment or worrying that actually, what if somebody finds out I don't know how to build a PowerPoint slide, or I don't know how to work with a pivot table on Excel? Yes. And I think a lot of the time we talk about AI or machine learning or data science, and actually there are some fundamental skills that during the K-12 journey and even during the university journey can sometimes go missing because that learner is learning a very particular pathway, and actually they get to their job without ever really knowing how to manipulate data on an Excel sheet. And then they're too embarrassed to actually even say that to their employer because they know they're going to get in trouble maybe. And it's about how do you provide that? Because I think at university, it's such a crucial stage of kind of an individual's kind of development before their career, that it's so important to make sure that during that time, they get those fundamental skills, because they're about to enter the working world, and those opportunities may or may not be there for them to learn the fundamental skills. They're going to have to go straight into negotiating or bidding on a contract. But some of those fundamental skills, if they're not there, then they're going to leave that particular individual worried about, well, maybe this is going to take me 2 or 3 times longer than it really should because I don't have those fundamental skills.
Okay, thank you. Annie, I heard you agree. You talked about having a very international cohort as well. Is this one of the considerations that you're making when you look at the skills that international students have? You have people joining from all different countries. They will have very different experiences before they come to university in terms of the fundamental skills they are taught.
Yes, I like very much the approach, Sammy's approach. It's very important. That is fundamental to understand the students' requirements, because nowadays each student is specifically looking for something that is worth it towards their final, whatever is their major, whatever is going to be their profession. In our case, to match even better the request from the students, we have, during the COVID, we are taking this advantage, the time is giving us a little bit more the possibility to get together. We have trained our professors, our team, also to face what we didn't know, what we didn't expect, So therefore, when students come over, to give you a specific example, let's say they have an internship for 20 hours per week. The rest of the time, they do spend time with managers, they spend time with our professors. And so one and the other, what is missing in one section, you know. So we do not think that everything can be done only through the working experience, you know, just go and that is what you're looking for and go forward. They still need guidance, you know. They still need to understand if that will become their final profession after they complete their degree. Because in our case, for example, in many cases, the majority, well, plus 3,000 international students, are that once they go back home to their home institutions, they will complete their last year, or they will be ready for the graduation, and they will go forward to graduate studies. Therefore, the experience in Italy at LDM is necessary for them to understand if that is really what they want to do in their life, in their professional life. So academically, we need to match also their desire, their wish. Sometimes can be compromising because students not always have tested themselves. So in this moment, studying under this emergency time is also a test for them. It's a test how to live with it, but also a test to understand if this will be the future, because in 2-3 years from now, when they will be ready to enter the real, what we call the real industrial or commercial business world, they don't know even the name of the jobs that they will be offered to them. So the point is this, they need to be ready for what is not yet known. But that starts from us, institutions. The institutions must make that first step. Our professors cannot just sit down and wait and say, we have the program, this is the course, we have 600 courses and that's enough. It's not enough. Each specific course must be updated, must be modeled, must be tailored to the needs of today and also to what will be the future of professions. Thinking about the Polytechnici in Italy, that are really our beacon. I mean, they are telling us exactly, not only at today's need, but also tomorrow, what will be the future professions and how we can prepare the students to take over and to become the next generation, you know, the productive next generation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ernie. Marco, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah. No, first of all, I'm grateful to Sami because I mean, it's comforting to realize that the issue that some students lack basic skills is common to many other institutions and not only in our place. I mean, we do have the experience of this. I mean, sometimes you realize some students know everything about Python, but then they don't know how to fire up Excel, which is quite ridiculous, or stuff like that. And the major question that comes up then is, okay, so what do you do about it? Because on the one side, you could say, okay, let's dedicate courses and credits to learning basic skills. But then you realize that if you do this, I mean, you're giving up a lot of other options, which could be of greater value. Another possibility, of course, is to say, let's make it happen in the process. And let's have some peer learning happening. I mean, if this is something I personally do in my courses. I mean, I give them assignments that require to use Excel at a fairly sophisticated level. And some students know how to do it. Other people don't know how to do it. It's teamwork. So in the end, everybody learns how to do a pivot table or stuff like that. And now, of course, it's not so efficient on their side, but it's much more efficient on my side. And another possibility that comes to my mind is to share pointers to material that might be available to actually catch up on the skills that they're missing. Now, of course, I'm not saying I will buy services from Coursera from tomorrow, but I do think that, let's say, the amount of information and teaching material that is available is bewildering. And really, you don't probably need to teach things at university in some cases. You can simply share pointers. as long as the pointers are, let's say, decently referenced and validated. You can't tell students, oh, you don't know how to do a pivot table, just go Google it and find your way, because this would be a waste of time. But you could say, well, go there, and in that place, I mean, half an hour, you get out of that video and you learn how to do it. So this is something that we were not used to doing, because usually as professors, we were used to being the people who would produce and share the knowledge personally, whereas now the point is becoming more like gatekeepers than actually teachers, which is a bit different. And I think this is a very important point, because you can't have it all. You can't put everything in credits and curricula, but you can't also expect students to do things on their own.
So, Marco, is to follow on from that point, then, if you look at the changing roles becoming more of a gatekeeper, what becomes the most important thing that you can give a student?
It's hard to tell. I would say that the most important thing you can give a student is the basic knowledge and, let's say, learning skills, so that they learn something now and they will learn how to learn in the future. So there are a few things you have to break with them. I mean, think about more complex subjects which are technical, which require demonstrations and mathematical demonstrations in class, whatever. You can't tell the students read the book or go online. You actually have to do it with the students. And I don't even use the slides in those cases. I actually write down the formula and draw the graphs with them, even if I have to do it via Zoom, because they have to build it with me. Okay, so some things you have to do it with them. Other things are commodities. I mean, go out and learn by yourselves. And I think this is probably, again, the key discernment that each lecturer must learn how to cope with. What is something that is absolutely must be digested and educated through your own interaction with students, and what is a commodity they can simply go out and learn by something, maybe by somebody who's better than you? Because that's the other point. I mean, there are some, let's say, more commodity-like topics where I'm not the best lecturer, and probably any is much better than me. So if there's a video of any teaching subject topic X on YouTube, go there. And maybe you come back to me and we do a practical exercise in class, building on that beautiful lecture that Annie just came up with. Now this is something that is radically different from the traditional model of the professor, I know.
Okay, thank you very much. Bhavin, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd touch on this point about kind of getting supplemental materials to kind of traditional teaching. So a number of conversations that we're involved in ends up being around, you know, if we're bringing in this supplemental material, obviously it's great because sometimes you can pull expertise from several other areas. But a lot of the conversation is then focused in on, if we are divesting this academic time away from teaching, what is it we're going to use that time for? And I just want to share, interestingly, it's kind of falling into two camps, the conversations that we're hearing, at least back from the Italian universities. The first is from a research intensive perspective, is that if we were to give a professor time back, say this 20% of their calendar week where they no longer have to teach this one subject, which they absolutely detested teaching in the first place, can we use that 20% of the time back for them to apply for more research grants or more research funding? So there are some professors who are that way inclined and actually would prefer to reutilize that time for kind of those kind of activities. But there's a whole bunch of institutes and faculties that we're speaking to that are talking about pastoral care. So the other side of the coin, where a student may be having difficulties in a classroom and being able to free up some time to understand who is struggling or who may drop out of their university pathway, their learning ecosystem, with a professor who's got more time because they've divested a little bit of their learning away to supplemental sources. They're then able to spend that, as Annie mentioned, that one-to-one time, that consultative time, so you can make sure they stay connected up into their own learning programs and their own learning pathways.
Great. Thank you very much, Bhavin. Carla's joined us. I don't know, Carla, what your connection's like, but you're more than welcome to turn on your camera and your microphone and join the discussion if you wish to. To the point that buongiorno Carla, come va?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, Carla's joining us from University da Pavia. Carla, we're having a discussion for an hour. One of the topics we're talking about now is how the scheduling of professor and teachers' times are changing because of the way that students are learning independently online. I was wondering if there have been any significant changes you have seen in terms of both how staff are organizing their time and also how students are organizing their time now.
Well, my experience is the time they spend in learning in an autonomous way is very short. I think that they are using very few information from our lessons, and they try to reduce as much as possible the time devoted to study. So they are trying to use all the facilities we try to give them to bypass the problem of cannot being in presence. They are trying to use in the, let me say, the wrong way, because they are not using these facilities in the way to have the best way to study, but to only reduce time devoted to study. Only to they are trying not to use books, not to use notes, only use registration, which is the main way that we are asked to give them our lessons online. To reduce as much as possible times to use for studies. So I think it's quite difficult to teach them that this must be an opportunity and not a bypass, an escape. I don't know how to describe this.
Yeah.
Because I think that the quality of the results is lower than before. Is downgrading the quality of what they are learning. I'm not sure that. I think that it also can be due to the fact that we were not prepared to this change, and we were not so in the skills that we have to use in the pandemic time. So perhaps something has been used in the wrong way, some opportunities, but I don't know. If I teach in the first year at university, and I have this perception as they want to reduce as much as possible the time to spend in studying. So they use registration for have less notes, less things to read, to hear, to learn. I don't know if this is a point that also other colleagues have observed, but in these last 2 years, I have seen this decrease in attention and the quality of the results in my courses.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. It's interesting to hear that. Sammy, can you tell us a little bit about whether you've seen evidence of this and how the universities that you work with at Coursera are addressing it, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Carla brings up a really good point. Learner behavior is changing, sometimes in a good way, sometimes not in a great way. And I think it's actually up to universities to kind of stay strong at times and not bend to the idea that all change is good, right? Because being a father of two, I also, like Bhavin, have to go through moments where I have to think to myself, well, actually, my children are proposing a different idea of parenting or of being my children, right? Like, can I have this cake? Can I do this? Can I do that? And there are times where you actually have to think, okay, like their way doesn't sound so bad, that we can achieve it their way too. But there are times where you have to think, actually, no, I have to stick to the principles because they've been working for a very, very long time. And there are particular reasons for why, let's say, education is delivered in a particular way for a particular program. This idea that students are wanting to spend less time, this is a global problem, that the entire globe right now is really interested in chunks of information. They don't want the full meal anymore. They just want the little bites, the little pieces of information over and over and over again from different sources. And I think as a global audience, we have so much pull on our attention right now, right? There are so many sources vying for our attention. Our phone beeps every 10 seconds about something, and it turns us into becoming dependent on receiving information in short form. And I think it's up to us, kind of in the education community as well, to, okay, there may be times where maybe change is a good thing. And I think let's trial, let's pilot, universities are innovators, they're kind of hubs for innovation. And it's here that actually we can try new things and see if they work, but with the idea that actually not everything is going to change all at once, and there are some principles that need to stick to the way that they are. So that's kind of been my view of where universities, for example, let's say that they do want to deliver a program online because their learners are saying, I want this online. Everybody's getting everything online. I want it all online. And I think it's right for some programs. And I think for some programs, that isn't the right route. And maybe you can deliver part of that program online for learners who absolutely have no other option. But there are learners who can choose. And if it's the right thing, that actually the majority of that is face-to-face still, then I think that's the right thing to do for the time being. But maybe there are programs where actually you wake up and you go, you know what, actually maybe online is the right one for this, and I don't need to hold on to the principle for this particular program.
Oh, thank you. Marco, please.
Well,
oh, you're on mute. Sorry, I think you hit it twice.
Yeah, that's right. I completely agree with Carla that the problem is there. What I actually perceive is that what is coming out is like a new model of university somehow, realizing that the key actors of the university are, let's say, not completely on the same page when it comes to the learning experience. In the sense that, first of all, professors are, especially in Italy, are not looking after teaching as much as they should, because everything is being measured on the side of research. Now, I'm happy that I'm a full professor, so I don't have any further career to make. But if I look at my younger colleagues, teaching to them is more like a distraction. And it's something you've got to do, but it's not the real thing. And at the same time, the students have, I would call it sort of like an anxiety. They're so anxious about their future that the point is, let's get over with this as fast as possible with the highest marks possible. And who cares if that implies learning something or not? And it's funny that this even happens for the top students. I mean, we've got these honors programs in Politecnico di Torino together with Politecnico di Milano, and these students are really brilliant. So the point is, don't care about your career because you will go into McKinsey straight away. I mean, you'll be fought over by McKinsey and BCG and Bain. So think about other things like what is worthwhile to learn? How do you learn how to learn? I mean, think about being a mature young person in university, having fun as well, not being anxious, and learning how to do things. And I think that this really brings us to the point that we don't have, I would call it like a teaching covenant between faculty and students about what is it about being a professor, and what is my promise to you, and what is it about being a student, what is my promise to faculty. Because it's really like a bureaucratic thing. I go and lecture in because I've got to, and I go in class because I tick the boxes, and after X credits, I'm out. And cross fingers because we don't know what will happen of me. And this is really something that is terrible, because it distracts students from the real point that the experience of learning and learning how to learn, it's theirs. I mean, students are not a product of university. They're the actors in university, at least as far as teaching goes. So I think that this is really the conversation that actually should be run in some way. And of course, all the rest about the tools that we use or we do not use is, let's say, ancillary to the main point about who is there and what's the purpose of being there. And of course, this is a difficult topic because, of course, if you had very small universities like in the US, I mean, small groups, I mean, few students per professor, a lot of admin stuff, that would be very easy. Now, it's difficult when you're talking about large universities like in Italy, like you got 35 or 36,000 we got in Politecnico di Torino, but think about the 100,000 students or whatever they have in La Sapienza in Rome. And in that huge, massive amount of people, which are individuals, okay, you've got everything from the fairly well-off and well-studied student coming from a good family with brilliant high school, and that person has got a career no matter what, all the way to the young student, maybe son and daughter of immigrants, first person going to university, parents having debt to bring them to university, and they're anxious about, hey, what if I fail? And that is, I mean, I think going back to that level is really the way to look at it.
Thank you. To the point you made earlier, and I think Eni mentioned this a little bit when he was talking about international communities of students, does peer learning offer some respite to this? You know, if you can put together diverse groups of students, do you essentially, you know, make it easier for them to spend longer on a project,
Yeah.
or and to not have the very transactional relationship that Carlo was talking about?
I would say yes, but again, it's not easy to do it if you don't have this learning agreement, which is deeply embedded. Now, I'll give you an example. If I look at the student teams in Politecnico di Torino, the ones who make race cars or motorbikes or boats or whatever, diversity works beautifully because the students know they want to be there to have an additional experience, and this huge diversity really becomes a value. It's a hindrance at the beginning, but then becomes a big value. Now, if instead I look at the courses we run in English, where we have roughly about some 30% Italians and the rest are communities from all over the world, it's very hard to convince students to have mix of groups. If I do teamworks for them, like assignments in small groups, invariably they will form national teams because, oh, we already know each other and all that sort of stuff. And if I tell them, no, listen, now this academic year, I decide and I mix and match you, oh, everybody starts complaining, saying, Professor, it's harder. Now, no, of course it is, okay? It's harder, and the course is so demanding, and you add this additional layer of complexity, and so this is not fair. And it's hard because, I mean, it's not something they expect, and therefore it's something they refuse. So it's not easy to do it. I know I should do it, but at the same time, what should I give up? If I force onto my students the additional complexity of making a mixed international group and all this problem of diversity, I know I should give up a little bit of the contents, okay? But then I think, okay, but if I give up a little bit of the contents, they don't learn the hard skills, blah, blah, blah. So it's always a matter of trade-off.
Great, thank you very much. Eni, do you have anything to add? We're very close to time, but I just would like to hear your thoughts of whether the problems that Carlo and Marco are describing, if you have experience of those.
Yes, I really appreciate so much what Carlo said, and also Marco, and I think that we are aligned also with what Sami just said before. I think that we are facing a new educational process. You know, in this moment, universities, I think, even though they're headed by different directions, they're all searching their answers and, you know, the best way to deal with the situation. We think we have to, when we speak about innovation, but we need to innovate ourselves. I mean, ourselves as professors, ourselves as institutions, and also as providers of education. And the same thing applies to the now so much in vogue and so much in fashion for the online providers. Also, Coursera and others rely on basic models of delivering online lessons. We need all of us get together and find that at the center, as Marco just mentioned, the main actor is our students. And so the students now, as Carla said, is they have no time at all, or maybe not even the will to read a full book or full paragraph or whatever. They do skim reading, and this is really it's limiting, their learning objectives. So this is a question that we need to ask ourselves. Why we conduct lectures? Why course has because it's been created? What is the purpose of that specific course? So then we need to update our way of delivering education. And also this, of course, it comes to a bigger question, the role of university in the future. And world at the end meeting, and Marco said we run a basic style as a US style. So students learn by doing. So we avoid all that bureaucracy that is between institution, professors, lectures, prompter lesson, or whatever. It is by having the students become the main actor in the classroom, the main actor in the community. This is of course an effort that can be done by an institution of small size. I don't know, and I don't have the answers to these questions for larger institutions. This is up to our leaders.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I appreciate we've run slightly over, and I know everyone's very busy, so we'll end things there. Carla, I'm sorry you couldn't join initially, but thank you very much for joining us for the end of the discussion. Sami, Bavin, thank you very much for joining us from Coursera today. It's been really interesting to hear everybody's insights, see what the different challenges are, what the similarities are. As I said, there will be a full recording of this session on the Times Higher website. We will send you the link. There will also be a summary article if you want to revisit the discussion or share it with colleagues, if sometimes people find that useful. So Marco, Carla, grazie per tutti e arrivederci.